go.
Going that dark. Traffic is.
Gary,
Transfer.
they want you to sit over here. This is the only monitor that's working.
Sit over there and
You gotta sit up here at the big table. The only way you can-
I'll sit at the back.
You can sit at the adult table.
I'll sit at the
We're like,
Jim just wants us, our backs so we can keep, he knows what we're doing. It goes up. Yeah.
she was actually more great than myself.
Good morning, everyone. Being 9 o'clock, I'm going to call the Marathon County Infrastructure Committee to order. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Number 3, public comment. I did not receive any requests for public comment. No one, Dave didn't. Jim, no public comment requests? Thank you. All right, move on to number 4, approval of the March 9th, 2023 Infrastructure Committee meeting minutes that are in your packet. Is there any corrections or discussions? Motion by Supervisor Robinson. Second by Supervisor Christensen, or Dickinson. Yeah, I wanted Christensen back in here, but you kind of look like him. But anyways, we got a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to number 5, policy issue discussion and potential committee determination. 5A, adoption of certification of petition for disaster damage aids for County Road KK, Town of Mosen East, Section 4. That's also in your packet, and I'll turn that over to Jim.
Thank you. This past Sunday, we had a culvert failure that probably most of you are aware of. At this point on County Trunk Highway KK, we had the culvert failure out on Highway KK. It was a large arch pipe that was out there. The culvert starting to, was ending its end of life. It had washed out behind the culvert and started washing away, eroding some of the material, the backfill material, and it ended up collapsing the top of that pipe. After reviewing that pipe, Kevin and I were both out there numerous times already. We can see where it's beginning to wash out farther to the south, where repair of this structure at this point is not safe for the public to start traveling that road. So we are going to keep that road closed until time of repair. Well, we do have a culvert ordered for that pipe. We are getting a twin box culvert, which is an improvement. You can see from the pictures, there's a large arch pipe in there at this point. We are going to move into a twin box culvert for replacement. The schedule for that was about the second or third week of June. We talked to the manufacturer of the pipe. They're very busy on a couple other bridge structures. They're doing the best they can to move us up. They look like they're moving it up 2 to 3 weeks. So what puts us in a schedule of beginning that maybe about the second week of May with completion in early June. We are applying for disaster damage aids through the Wisconsin Department of Transportation for this project. What the petition does, it pays is 75% for replacement, plus 50% for any increase of construction of higher type or improvements. So the pipe itself, if we would go with a metal pipe, we have the cost on that compared to our $249,000 for the concrete pipe. So what we'll end up doing is getting, if prices come in as quoted, we're looking roughly about $63,750 for the pipe, that would be the 75% to match what's there. The improvement, seeing that's a 249,000, would give us another 80,000, so we'd have $143,750 towards the pipe. The labor doesn't really matter if we're putting in the concrete structure or the arch pipe. We still need to dig down, put some ramps in. So the labor and for the installation's about 183. So out of the $490,000 that's projected, if this petition would go through and be accepted by the state, ballpark number, we'd be getting about $327,500 back if this petition would be accepted. So what I need to do is send in some cost estimates, which we have, pictures, which I've included in your packet, and the application. I just need approval from this committee to submit that petition.
Thank you. Any questions? Supervisor Robinson?
So Jim, if this hadn't collapsed like this, would we be eligible for the state aid?
No, we would not.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Robinson?
I would move that we direct appropriate staff to submit the application for disaster damage aids for Highway KK.
Got a motion. Going to need a second. Supervisor Seibert. Any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to number 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. 6A, resolution to appoint Ben Peterson to Marathon County Weed Commissioner under state statute 66.05, 17. And Jim, do you want to take that?
Sure. I worked with Michael and Corp Counsel's office for this, and we looked at other counties in the neighborhood, Wood, Portage, what they were using. We did have some concern about liability, so Michael also put together, it's not in your packet, but an agreement for the weed commissioner, talking about the annual salary will be $0 for him, which Ben is fine with. That we are going to comply with all industry standards. He won't sublet any of the work. He's going to comply with all the requirements of state, municipal, and federal authorities. It's also, there's a hold harmless in the agreement, and where we can terminate it for either party with a 30-day notice. Again, this is to help us with the control of mostly the wild parsnip that's becoming quite an issue on the east side of the county, more so in the west, but it is starting to migrate to the west a little bit. I know Knowlton area is having a lot of problems with the wild parsnip. So again, what this does is it gives us another tool that we can have somebody go out and work with the locals when we go out there and spray our right-of-way. We're spraying 40 feet of right-of-way for wild parsnip, and behind it, I'm thinking of one area in particular on Highway 52, that right behind the right-of-way, there's probably about 3 acres of wild parsnip. Wild parsnip spreads rapidly. I'm anticipating that 2 or 3 acres will be 5 or 6 acres if we don't get a handle on this. So again, this gives the authority through state statute, for the weed commissioner to work with them. According to state statute, he actually has the rights is to go out there without any written agreements, but we are going to require him to have written agreements from the landowners before we go out there and work with him. Did I miss anything, Mike?
Any questions for Jim? Go ahead, Supervisor Seibert.
Talking parsnip, or are we talking hogweed, or are we talking?
No, we're talking all the
All the-
invasive
the mammals.
species. Yep.
Any other thoughts, questions? All right, then I'll need a motion to approve this. Motion by Supervisor Seibert, second by Supervisor Robinson. Any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jim and Mike. Moving on to number 7, educational presentation and committee discussion. 7.8, general update on potential relocation of Highway Department, WASA site relocation, visited costs, projections, efforts to identify alternative funds, and next steps. Administrator Leonard, if you want to take that, there's information in your packet too on what he has done so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a pretty wide-ranging topic, really just meant to kind of bring you up to speed on a couple of things that, quite honestly, we've been talking about this committee, so you're all, I think, very well aware of a lot of this, but just allowing for really a wide-ranging discussion, hopefully answering any questions you guys might have. And if at any point, Jim, I miss anything, just feel free to jump in. But as Chair McEwen referenced, really want to do a couple of things, talk briefly on some revised cost projections that we've been working with our financial advisors to put together on kind of the joint project that we've talked about here, joint highway, parks, and emergency management shop, as opposed to a highway-only relocation. Talk at a very high level in that respect, relative to debt service levy impacts of each of those options. Give you an update, as I referred to at the last meeting, about an effort we recently made after conferring with Wisconsin Counties Association and Chair Gibbs about seeking some outside funding for the project after the West Side Master Plan was adopted, and then really some next steps. So again, a fair amount of information, but it's going to be at a very high level. So I want to start with that caveat. This is general information, our financial information that we got from our financial advisors. There's a lot of assumptions in here. Of course, I want to be very clear, we're not going out to borrow any funds. That there's a significant process for that. This was really just to kind of shore up a piece that I think we haven't talked about, quite honestly, in a while. I conferred with Jim, and it's probably been quite a number of years since really we talked about the cost of building a new highway department. A lot of our work with our consultant, our architectural consultant, has been conceptual to help us identify the size of lot or the property, the amount of acres we would need to relocate the highway department and those other departments. Not so much about helping us develop some cost projections. And the project, as all of you know, has changed over the time that it's been discussed. And this project has been discussed before I've been in administration, so it's been a number of years. So just want to start with that. So as I indicated, our projections initially have been aimed at helping us identify sites, which has been a long-standing discussion at this committee. That shared site location based on the conceptual information from our architect is looking in that 35 to 40 acre site. A highway-only relocation is more in that 18 to 20 acre size that we would need. But we wanted to go through and get some rough construction estimates based on the changing in the market and take those to our financial advisors to bring some information to you today. So that's really where I'm going to start. And again, I want to be very clear with the caveat that when I get to the information from PFM, that they made a number of assumptions because they had to. We didn't go through, and we're not going to know what our interest rate is going to be until we would ever move forward with a borrowing. We're also not going to ever truly know the cost of the facility until we put that out for bid. So we had a number of assumptions that I'll talk about in a little bit. But I wanted to start with current state of our outstanding general obligation debt. This should look familiar to all of you, at least most of it. There's a little bit of a new column in here with the North Central Healthcare debt repayment revenues, but this is our current outstanding general obligation debt schedule from current 2023 through 2045 when all of the current debt would fall off. So you'll see one of the things that you can see from the schedule itself, and it's a little bit different than what was in the budget because, as you know, through the budget process, you refinanced some of North Central Healthcare's debt internally using some of our internal reserve funds. But you see that the debt service obligation does kind of step down over time. And why that's important, as I'll talk about later, is it's my sense as your administrator that it's really important to schedule large standing construction projects to keep that tax rate, essentially that debt service tax rate, that levy rate, as stable as possible. What you really don't want is a large amount of debt to fall off, a rate to drop, and then 3 years later, a significant increase in rate. That's hard for individual property owners to, first of all, understand, but it causes the overall tax bill to fluctuate. It can cause it to fluctuate quite a bit. And you'll see that in the right column. You'll have the mill rate on existing debt and what that looks like, how it does over time go down. And the reason for that is that, as all of you know, your property values, generally speaking, continue to grow at a fairly stable rate. Now, of course, there's interruptions in that, and the financial advisors in these projections assumed a 4% increase, but that's generally, I think that's a pretty safe assumption. So moving on to the next slide. I apologize, it's hard for me to see that, but it's slide 14. It shows you that step down over time. It's just a graphical representation of that table above. And similarly with the mill rate, you'll see that it drops over time and then stabilizes when you get out to those later years in that debt service, which is 2032 and beyond. And again, the reason for that is North Central Healthcare's obligations through your refinancing take significant steps down over the next several years before they are essentially taking on that full obligation. So financing the highway shop that we've been talking about relocating. So the work that we've done with our architectural consultant, our conceptual work, they reached out to a construction cost advisor. And based on the conceptual work that we've done with both Jim's department, Jamie's department, Parks, Rec, and Forestry, as well as some preliminary work with emergency management, you see we have two options here. The first option is highway shop only relocation, and the second is a joint relocation. And again, I want to be very clear, these are projections. You're not going to know the real cost of what a facility is going to be until you put it out for bid. One of our neighboring counties recently undertook a large project, and their cost estimates were significantly, their bids they received were significantly above what their cost estimates are. I think we're in a better position to be a little bit more accurate because we've seen the market change, and our cost advisors have taken that into account as best they can, but I want to be very clear they are estimates. So you'll see the highway only relocation is an estimate of $58 million in terms of project cost. The joint consolidated multi-department shop would be in that $90 million range. As you, and I know everyone on this committee understands this, but as you move down the table, what you see are the cost of pursuing any borrowing for that project. And we would need to borrow for either course of action that we took. Again, a caveat here, however, is that we're borrowing for the full amount. There's not any utilization of ARPA funds or reserve funds to defray any upfront costs. This is the full initial projections being borrowed for over time, and you'll see the cost there increases to $58,625,000 for that highway only, and then $90,935,000 that you'd finance for the joint shop. This references what I indicated before. It's that valuation trend over time, and the financial advisors put this in to kind of give you some sense as to why they assumed a 4% increase in valuation over time, to give you an idea of what the future mill rate impacts, the debt service mill rate impacts are going to be when we get to the later charts. But again, that should look relatively familiar to you. We have a similar chart we include in the budget each year. So this is kind of option one, and I asked them to do a couple of things. One is to develop scenarios for both options based on timing. And this really demonstrates, and I'm not going to go into detail on it, but it really demonstrates the point I made earlier about the importance of scheduling a project in light of your ongoing general obligation debt to make sure that it's happening. It's not only very important to do everything you can to secure a strong bond rating so that your interest rate costs are low, secure good estimates so that when you put out the project for bid that your estimates are in line with your real costs that you're going to anticipate. But also scheduling is very important because, again, you want that general obligation debt obligation that the county has to be relatively stable over time. And you'll see with respect to issuing those bonds in 2025, here's a table that essentially goes through what those obligations look like and the various payments that would be made in each of those ensuing years based on the borrowing that I referenced before. I'm trying to pull this up on my computer so I can follow along. It's a long way across the way. So you'll see that. Yeah, thanks, Jerry. On the far right, you actually can get some sense as to what, based on the project, the highway-only borrowing, what the impact would be per 100,000 of valuation for homeowners for that first year of increase. And again, it would step down over time because your valuation increases. But on a $200,000 house, if we were to pursue building a new highway shop with level debt service, assuming a 4%, 4.15% interest rate in 2025 that we went out for borrowing, that's the impacts that you're going to see. And you'll see the impact on the existing mill rate, how it would go up. The borrowing for that highway-only relocation would be about 29 cents. And then it would increase your overall mill rate to that 42 cents and then dropping down to 36 cents. So I'm not going to go into detail on it, but it's really just meant to show the timing, the importance of timing. So this is a graphical representation, and you'll see that significant initial increase in that debt service obligation. The next slide shows the impact on mill rate. And again, it's a significant increase in the mill rate based on that borrowing. But again, my caveat here, it's assuming a level borrowing. It's not taking into account, and we would have the opportunity to kind of level that off with the schedule of payments that we could work out with the financial advisors when we put that borrowing package together, and some other things we can do to level that off. But I just wanted to have them put together some information for you that showed how important that scheduling was. Similarly, with respect to the next page. Yes, thanks, Jerry. Let me go up one here. The chart on the ensuing page shows, if you delay that just a little bit, what that impact shows. And it's probably best shown on the graphical document, but you'll see that the overall debt service obligation, this isn't surprising because we're essentially going down a couple of steps before we increase our obligations. The impact to the taxpayer, they're not having their rate go up to the same level that it would if you borrowed earlier, because as set forth in our obligation schedule, right now, at least for the next couple of years, you are still agreeing to cover some of North Central's debt obligations for the next several years. So as those step down, if you delay the project slightly, you essentially are several steps down in your repayment before it goes up. Similar graphical representation on the next slide, focus more on that mill rate as opposed to focus solely on the overall debt obligation. And then, again, not going to go into detail on this, but it shouldn't surprise anyone that with option 2, that joint shared shop, you're having a larger initial corpus you're borrowing for. Your impact on the mill rate is going to be increased. Again, that project is $90 million if you move forward with that initially. The total overall impact on the mill rate for that project alone, if you borrow in 2025 and your first debt payment then is in 2026, it's about 45.5 cents on the debt service levy for that project. Again, assuming all of the project costs were paid for with debt service, but generally speaking, for large projects, counties around the state of Wisconsin utilize debt service levy for that. But you'll see that impact. So kind of some big takeaways, again, in terms of scheduling. It's important to schedule the project. The takeaways with respect to the options before us, I know Jim, Jamie, and I have met with our consultant a number of times. And one of the takeaways for me, and I'd like to get some feedback from this committee, it's been my experience that we've really focused on the idea of consolidating the footprint from a conceptual standpoint, not so much driven by cost. The increase here from moving from just shy of 60 million to 90 million for the project, my sense is that it behooves us to take a second look at perhaps relocating highway only is the better course of action. It opens up our opportunities relative to land purchase as well, because Parks, Rec, and Forestry, as you all know, is a county department that serves also all of the City of Wausau parks based on a service agreement that we're actually working on refining right now. So if we're able to take a look at relocating highway only, it not only is going to bring down the cost of the project from that $90 million relocation to, at least based on our projections, closer to that $58 million relocation, but it should allow us some flexibility, expanded flexibility relative to site location, which could have a corresponding positive impact on site acquisition costs. Of course, that does mean that I don't want to tell you that the Parks Department would need some enhancements as well. They have some site needs, but my belief, based on what I understand right now, is that we can provide for some of those at a significantly lower cost than what the joint facility would be. So that's what we asked our financial advisors to put together this information for you. I know it's a lot to take in, and I didn't go into a whole lot of detail with respect to the presentation, but just to show you, again, kind of some other dynamics that we're working on. When you go to the last slide here, you'll see the market conditions, and I think this is important. When we borrowed for the North Central Lakeview Drive campus renovations, a lot of our borrowing took place kind of at the far right of that line graph, where interest rates were at historic lows. We had very low cost to acquire capital. That's not the case right now. Our financial advisors are, as you can see from the documents earlier in the presentation, really looking at about that 4%, a little higher than 4% interest rate. And it does have a significant impact over the life of a borrowing, 20-year life of borrowing for a municipality in the state of Wisconsin on the overall cost of a project. I would like to think we could get back to the cost of capital at less than 1.5%, but I don't think that's a very reasonable assumption that it will happen anytime soon. But those are some of the market conditions that we're looking at. Of course, you also, one big caveat for our work is we really didn't have them do a whole lot of inflation escalations for delaying the project those couple of years. We had them do a slight increase, but that likewise, as we delay the project, the positive is that we're scheduling it within our overall environment of our general obligation debt. However, as you delay a project, certainly over the last several years, we've seen the increased cost of delay with inflation, both in terms of materials, but also very importantly in terms of labor. So that's the high-level overview of the cost projections that we had. The financial advisors put together, again, just to kind of lay some more foundation in terms of where we are. I know it's, even for me, this project, like I said before, it predates me coming into administration. So I know there's been a lot of conversation, but as Jamie, Jim, and I met, it occurred to us a lot of that conversation has been relative to working with our architectural consultant to help us determine the property needs in terms of size, as opposed to taking another fresh look at what those cost projections might look like for a project. So that's the financial piece, and I'd be happy to take any questions on that before I get into some of the work we do, and I'll do it very briefly on our outside funding application that we made, and then just a general update as to additional conversations we have had relative to land acquisition recently.
Thank you, Administrator Leonard. Supervisor Robinson?
I just want to make the note that this is one component of our borrowing and our future needs from a capital perspective, and not all of them. And so we need to look at this in the context of what the other needs are and where the other borrowing might be, because that will have an impact. And I think we'll have to try to set some priorities and as we go forward, because this isn't the only project that we have in the planning stage.
Thank you. Supervisor Dickinson?
Yeah, just following up on that, I had written that same thing down. Like, what are the other obligations that are potentially out there, regional, the Morgue Regional Center, if we're going to do that, and because that would be that's a serious consideration.
Absolutely, and I think I completely agree with both of you. That's kind of been one of the things that I don't think we've done exceedingly well. I've been reaching out to my colleagues to see what approaches they've taken in terms of scheduling these, and the best information I have right now in terms of strategy, because there are things that you can plan for. I referenced this before, you adopted the West Side Master Plan. We can look to try to understand when are the big projects as part of that West Side Master Plan, to stage them, for lack of a better term. And Supervisor Dickinson brought up the Forensic Science Center. Right now, the information we have is that, we're seeking a lot of outside funding for that, with the perpetually optimistic anticipation that some other outside funding source will cover all of the initial capital other than the capital contribution the county has already encumbered from ARPA funds. But in terms of projects that are outstanding, apart from the West Side Master Plan, one thing that the county board approved, I believe is in 2012, again, predates me in administration, but the courthouse remodel. There are some facility needs with respect to the courthouse and the jail property. Excuse me. The building of a new jail is something that has been on the part of the conversation on and off for as long as I think lived in Marathon County. I'm not saying that we need to move forward with that, but those are some other outstanding needs. The best strategy I've seen from a county really gets to what I talked about before. How do you schedule your debt payments? You'll see from the documents that I included in the packet from our financial advisors, it assumes a relatively flat debt service. One of my colleagues referenced that his general approach is to intentionally work through the financial advisors to have significant step downs at various yearly increments, so that with respect to each borrowing, when, for lack of a better word, the next cliff is coming, so that you can schedule another need, another project to come online at the same time that cliff would otherwise be approaching. And this is something, in speaking with the Wausau School District on one of their, I had the opportunity to serve in one of their work groups or discussion groups, and that was one of the things that their financial advisors had brought up, their financial director, really the importance of scheduling construction projects and having those, like, when is debt coming off, so that you can make sure that you have another project, a priority project, kind of set in line to take that. We have a lot of obligations in terms of projects. I think we are, however, set up in a pretty good position. Over the last 5 years, Marathon County has done more facility work than they probably have in the preceding 20. We're consolidating a lot of our facilities, and I'll make a presentation to the board in April about this. I've made it to HR Finance at their last meeting about the opportunities we have at the Lakeview Drive campus. We will be moving social services by the end of this month. They'll be into that location, so you have opportunities with respect to property divestment there. You have opportunities, based on our plan, our current plan to divest River Drive in the next several years. So you've done a lot of facility work that kind of takes away the need for those really large projects, but the highway relocation is probably, in my mind, the next significant one you have on the schedule. But making some determination as to whether it is only the highway department being relocated or it's a joint facility is probably the most pressing decision we need to make. I don't know that it's anything we need to make in the next 3 months, but my hope is that we have a little bit more information for you in terms of property acquisition. I had that conversation with, if we do kind of change the direction we're going with our Parks Director, Jamie Polly. And again, my sense is there's some things we can do at their current operations site to accommodate relocating their administrative leadership from River Drive into that site for a far less cost than the incremental increase to create a joint facility. So I think that's the direction I want to at least provide you some additional information on. But to your specific point, Supervisor Dickinson, I see the highway department as it's the gateway to the West Side Master Plan that you just approved. There's a lot of things on that that are large cost. The largest cost, of course, being the creation of the ice sheets, the ice arena, but that can't be moved forward until we find a place for the highway department, at least not in my initial contemplation. So that's probably first on the list. Then there's some West Side Master Plan large projects, which we would hope would come with significant outside funding. And then I would say the next one probably on the list is something here at the courthouse, because this hasn't had a significant update in a number of years.
I have a question. Talk about moving projects forward. What projects can be moved forward if we end up paying that North Central Healthcare debt? If we have to pick up that $5 million a year, where is that going to come from?
That's a great question. So we did just, and it's on one of the earlier slides where it talks about the net general obligation debt obligation that the county has. You'll see that essentially we refinance that North Central debt based on your actions at the budget. If they can't service that, that is absolutely going to be a significant obligation for the county. I mean, it's on slide. In your packet, it's page 13 of 79 of the packet. You'll see the column that references NCHC debt repayment revenues. So in 2023, you covered the debt service obligation, not only of the county, but you covered all of the debt service obligations that were originally anticipated to be repaid by North Central Healthcare, servicing about $3.4 million, and there's a asterisk at the bottom of that very slide. $3.349 million of debt service was paid for from the county's working capital fund. Then we refinanced those debt obligations, and you'll see the debt obligations for North Central, $2 million in this coming year, 2024. That is not the full amount of the debt service obligation tied to the renovations on that campus for areas that are occupied by North Central Healthcare. That total North Central Healthcare obligation, and it's in your budget document. I don't have it up, but it's about $4 million, just for ballpark figures. So it's about half. Then you see we step it up by a $500,000 obligation increase each of the next several years. North Central isn't taking on their full obligation until 2028. Now, to your specific point, if North Central can't take on those debt repayment obligations in full as set forth in that schedule, or take on even the obligations that they're anticipating taking on in 2024, 25, 26, and 27, that's going to cause significant challenges with respect to the county. One of the things that HR Finance is talking about, and it'll be to the full board this month, is asking the state of Wisconsin to make some changes with respect to decisions they made to reduce the supplemental aid payments to North Central Healthcare. That was a significant unanticipated hit to North Central's budget. So we're going to engage legislators at the state to try to make sure that they properly fund AODA and substance abuse, as well as county nursing homes. But if that doesn't happen, I will have to come up with a plan. Other counties, I will say, when they do, my understanding, when they do projects similar to what our North Central Healthcare campus renovations are, those are covered by debt levy. If North Central can't service those debt payments, we of course can't dip into working capital to the degree we did this last year. But we'll have to probably reduce our other capital improvement projects that we fund with CIP rollover each year to prioritize the service of some of that debt until perhaps equalized value, those 4% increases make that that increase that would be felt by the taxpayer a little bit more palatable. But right now, I'm anticipating North Central being able to service that. I know that's not the greatest of answers, but that we sat down with them and we put together this schedule, the refinancing schedule based on your actions through the budget. And that's going to be a big lift for North Central, but they're doing everything they can to work in that direction. The other thing I will say with respect to that the county's doing, and I'll present this at the full board when I talk about the long-range capital plan, we do have some opportunities for increased revenues from rent. If we consolidate our footprint, we'll save operational costs. But we've been having really positive meetings with the ADRC of Central Wisconsin about having them return to the Lakeview Drive campus. We have a really, I believe, a spot that'll fit them well. That's about, I don't have the rental numbers off the top of my head. I'm sure Supervisor Dickinson probably does, but I want to say it's about $140,000 ish of annual rent income. That, of course, would help service some of that debt obligation. We're also working with our partners to see if we can create that human services campus with some additional partners offering them space that we currently have available at a market rent. But we're gonna need to do a lot of things if North Central can't service that debt.
Thank you, Administrator Leonard. Jim, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I have at a much lower level is our operations that we have going on right now. Right now, I'm going with the assumption that we will be moving 5 to 7 years. And I can give you an example that's something that's happening here in the next few weeks. We failed our gas tank inspection last year, so we need to do some improvement on our gas tanks. There's one way to do it, to go in and fix it, that we know which lines are wrong, or we could go full bore, pull everything apart, and say we're going to put all new lines in. That would probably be double. So right now we're looking at 75 to 80,000, saying let's fix it for a temporary 5 to 7 year stay. If we want to stay here 30 years, we're probably looking at more of 145 to 150,000. So we are going with the lower option. We have a parking lot that's going to need major repairs here in a year, maybe 2 years. So we're going with the approaches. We're just patching it, holding it together to make it that, instead of pulling the parking out and, doing a full bore. We have a building that we store our sand salt in there's no sides left to that one building. We're patching onto that with anticipation saying, we're just staying here 5 to 7 years. So if that's not the direction, we need to know, again, not today, but we need to know soon, so when we start doing these repairs, that we're repairing them for long term and not the short term. That's, right now, that's the direction we're going.
I think that's a really good point to your earlier question, Supervisor Soibert. I mean, also recognizing that we're going to have facility costs just to stay at our current site that we're going to need to take on. So it's not as though the option is relocate the highway department or do a joint facility at whatever those costs are, or nothing. It's relocate at a significant cost or different cost to upgrade your existing facility to make sure it continues to work. So if there's no other questions on the financial pieces, I just want to give you a real quick update. We did reach out. Wisconsin Counties Association published the availability for applications for congressionally directed spending through the federal budget process. And after conferring with Chair Gibbs, we submitted 2. Supervisor Dickinson referenced one already, the Forensic Science Center. We'd already sought funding from the state. We hadn't heard that was a sure thing, so we sought funding as well for the same project from the congressionally directed spending process, and we also did for the very project I just referenced. We sought $55 million, referencing that the relocation of the highway department was necessary to enhance services that we deliver through the highway department on behalf of the residents of Marathon County, but also our work on state highways. And we also referenced its importance kind of as that first step in moving forward the West Side Master Plan that the board approved. So we submitted that at the beginning of last month. We don't anticipate hearing anything for a while, but certainly if we do hear anything, we will make you aware. But that's just one of those things we're always looking for. Once the board has kind of indicated that, hey, these projects are a priority, we try to apply for as much outside funding to mitigate the impact to local taxpayers as possible. So we did that, like I said, last month. The last update I'll give on the project is, as I referenced before, we're always having conversations relative to trying to find a suitable location for relocating the highway department. We met with a large corporation. Jamie and I met with them last week, had a very positive conversation about not the piece of property that we originally reached out to them about, but it led to some good conversations about potential other opportunities we might have. We're working to schedule another meeting with them, but as I referenced before, right now we don't have a site location to move forward with that we'd bring to this committee for your consideration, but we are still continuing to do that. Haven't heard anything from the city of Wausau relative to parcels that they would have, but should we move forward with a highway-only relocation, I think it does, as I referenced before, open us up to a little bit broader body of properties that could work. Because the easiest way to demonstrate that is it's important, as Jim has referenced before, for the highway department to really be near the kind of the flyway system, the highways, 29, 39, 51, that corridor. But if we're relocating parks as well, we're really limited to kind of that area within the city of Wausau or immediately outside it. We can move significantly south, I think, if we were able to really look at a highway-only relocation. I don't know, Jim, if you have anything you want to add. I know that was longer than I anticipated, so I apologize. But if you have any questions or want to talk to me after, happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Leonard. Supervisor Dickinson?
I just had one question. So if Parks was involved, I assume that Wausau would be contributing to the cost of the project since Parks also works for them?
That is one of the things we're looking at. And in fact, our current agreement with the city of Wausau, as I understand it, for the operations site that we have, anytime and that's on Party Street in the city of Wausau, any improvements we make to that site, the city of Wausau has historically funded 50%, because that's essentially the breakdown of the work between county parks and city parks. We haven't had discussions with them about relocating in a joint facility if that same approach would be utilized. From a logical standpoint, it certainly sounds like it should be, but that's a conversation we'd have to have. Great question.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Has there been any thought, I'm sure there have.
Use your microphone.
Any thoughts, and I'm sure there have, of the Parks Department taking over the Highway Department spot, using the land they need for the Parks Department, and then using the rest in the master plan of the park?
That was actually the original West Side Master Plan from, I can't remember what year the last West Side Master Plan was adopted, called for that very thing: highway to be relocated and parks to take over the highway buildings. As Jim referenced, the highway buildings themselves would require significant renovation to get them to where they could continue to be usable, whether it's for highway or for parks. We just had a walk through, Jamie and I walked through their facility with their operations supervisor last week to kind of talk about what is their current site on Party Street. It's a smaller site than what Jim and his team have on West Street. If we can make that work, my sense is that's more advantageous, because the highway department, the highway department site on West Street is it has more options with respect to future utilization than the Party Street properties. But your current West Side Master Plan does call for, if both were relocated, that the Party Street Parks buildings would be repurposed or redeveloped, I should say, for housing. But we've moved away from the county board's West Side Master Plan, moved away from simply taking parks from their current location and putting them in the highway buildings. I think, quite honestly, we could probably do some work I anticipate being able to develop a plan to take our admin staff from parks off of River Drive and relocate them on Party Street, make some modifications to Party Street at a cost that is less than what we would need to do to Jim's property to get that to be suitable for him. But good question.
How easy would the railroad move out of there?
Not. There's my understanding, and I haven't spoken with the railroad, perhaps Dave can, but I mean, that spur is still highly utilized for local industry. I haven't heard anything about them kind of ending operations for the foreseeable future, like well over a decade. I don't know, Dave, if you have any.
I would say the same. Yeah, there's enough capacity going into the industrial park that's using rail right now that I don't see them leaving that facility in the future at all either. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, good questions. Thank you, Administrator Leonard. I'm sure we'll be discussing this more often. If there's no objections, I want to move 7 down to 7E and F. Jerry Klein has another meeting at 10, so if no objections, we'll let him take care of those now. Go ahead.
Thank you. I don't have much news on Workday. There's not a lot of change from the last meeting. We're working on the budget piece of it, implementing that. We're working on decommissioning the data out of the old system. And then we're continuing to work on reporting. That's probably the area that we're struggling the most with, the financial reporting on things like budget versus actual for departments to use, like for Jim to use. Those reports are not as easy to use as we had hoped, so we have customization we need to do for that. The other item I had on the agenda was to talk about capital CIP requests, and I had met with Lance twice this week, actually, and this came up both times at our board meeting and then yesterday at our project prioritization. At the next infrastructure meeting, I'll have a list of capital projects that we'll be submitting. CIP for the county is due in early May, and the city is due in early June. Probably the biggest of note is looking at a new asset management system, which we would likely implement for the city in the first year that we do that, and then in the second year or third year, we would look at parks and highway. There are 5 different fleet management. There's the city has parks department. It's DPW group, which also does the police department's vehicles. Jim's got a fleet, and Parks has a fleet, and all of them need preventative maintenance scheduling, and some job costing related to things for crews out in the field. So we're going to be submitting a solution, a request for money for an asset management solution. Lance, I think, has some further conversations. Kim Trueblood has asked for some changes to the microphones to this room, which could be fairly expensive. So we're trying to put that price together. And then the city and the county are both interested in looking at meeting management software. So we are putting together a cost for that right now. So I'll have that for the next infrastructure meeting. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks for moving me up. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, we'll move back up. Go ahead.
Oh, he's here.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim.
While Jerry's here, we are partnering with Synergy, the Regional Economic Development Agency, relative to the BEAD planning grant, and there's a little over $100,000 available for the 5 counties in the Synergy service area, and that is to develop a plan on how we're going to try to identify the areas of need and where we'll focus. And our thought is, and with that, we'll be looking to build upon our past relationship with GeoPartners with their testing program. North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission just entered into another year's agreement with GeoPartners to make that service available. But we're trying to assemble the data necessary to make the case for including certain areas in the FCC's Fabric map, or their latest rendition of where services provided, and Jerry's been working on that. But we will be working with Synergy and the other parties, but each county will be developing their own plan and how we're going to do outreach. We started that yesterday with distributing the sheets relative to the Test It program at the grazing conference, and we'll be at the Fenwood watershed meeting next week, and we'll be trying to work with schools and others. We're also waiting for the new county webpage to come online to provide additional information relative to broadband. We will be looking for how we will be providing assistance to broadband efforts. Noor Ali Hassam, who was in the administrator's office, later transferred to the health department, will no longer be available. So we're looking at what our options are relative to supporting those efforts in the county. But our effort right now is to identify what sort of activity we will be doing to try to develop the plan. We're going to be focusing in on some of the known underserved areas, and also the area that, as you recall, LTD broadband had received the Rural Digital Opportunity funding for on the western part of the county, and then was later decertified by the FCC. So we're going to focus in on that area to try to identify where the needs are. We know that was an unserved or underserved area, and we need more information in there to be able to challenge some of the information in the Fabric. So Jerry, you want me
to talk about the NTIA meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so we met there's a state representative from NTIA now. She is headquartered, her name is Kara Cook, I think, if I remember to pronounce her last name. She's headquartered out of Eau Claire, and she attended our broadband task force meeting last Monday, and then John and I had a separate call with her a few days ago. She addressed the fact that they're going to be using the map, and it is value for us to keep the map going, but it's not going to affect the distribution for the June 30th, which is the really large distribution. She's working on a thing for us right now to clarify 2 things on the map that are the most disconcerting. One is there's a carrier called Bertram that's listed as having 50 by 10 coverage in the northeast corner of the county. We're trying to get clarification on how if that's going to be addressed. And then the other one is the whole county is listed by TDS as having coverage with US Cellular because they're reselling US Cellular's hotspot service. I have asked them to be very clear on whether they consider licensed cellular hotspot that has caps in it, monthly caps in it, whether that's going to be considered as served or unserved or neither, or underserved, I should say. Thank you. I'm sorry, that's the other piece. She just got back to us yesterday and said she's still working and trying to get clarification on that. That could be a big deal for us. The whole county is currently listed as covered by them. And then, the other thing is Lance and I are continuing to work with trying to get the license to do a bulk challenge. And actually, he just on the 30th got another question back from them. So we're making progress on that, but as I expected, it's pretty slow. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is I had a couple of conversations with the PSC in the last 2 weeks because I tried to give some effort into this stuff because I knew we're running out of time. There is nobody at the state level trying to coordinate all of the county's challenges to the map. That's what I had checked with Jaron McCallum at the PSC about it. So I reached out to August Neverman, who used to be the CIO of Brown County, and he's now their broadband coordinator for Brown County. There's only 2 counties that have broadband coordinators, Brown County and Door County. August and I are trying to reach out to the other IT directors at the county level and city level. We'll be attending a conference in May with them, but I think it's worthwhile trying to get together all of the counties sooner rather than later. So I'm going to probably work with August to try to at least set up a conference call and just invite all of the anybody at the county and city levels that's interested in talking about the broadband map, because there's no one at the state level that's trying to coordinate that.
Thank you. Supervisor Dickinson.
Would this be one of those things that you would be looking for, like a resolution from the county that we could submit to our state legislators?
I think that's what I'm trying to coordinate. I think I'm not ready, and there's nothing ready yet, but I think it would be valuable if we could get all the counties together and ask the state legislators for specific action on it, or at least the PSC. That's what I'm going to try to get moving on. I was disappointed. I thought the PSC would be taking care of this, but they're not.
Because it's very clear on the state level that this is an effort that's bipartisan, and you would think that this would be something that would be part of their plan already to have someone work on that. So it would seem to be a pretty easy step forward, I guess.
Go ahead, John.
Well, yeah, I think there's value in having a state-coordinated approach, but there's also the need to generate the granular data more on the local level. So I think there are 2 challenges that we have. One is how do we staff and provide the local assistance we need to get the granular data, and then how do we assemble that in a meaningful way to make it impactful on the NTIA's distribution of the $4.25 billion BEAD funding. That initial allocation is going to be made in June, and that's, Wisconsin can get anywhere from $800 million to $1.1 billion. I'd like to be on the $1.1 billion side of that, because that's still far from adequate, but a better step than the lower number. So it is something that may be worthwhile for us to look at, a coordinated approach and having somebody on the state level. Just the problems that Jerry's had to get licensed to do the bulk challenge on the county level is unbelievable. And to have somebody at the state level that could coordinate that would be a true time savings, and you wouldn't have to develop that expertise 72 times. So there is a lot of merit on that. We'll give it some thought.
So the 2 other things then, that I just remembered. If we can get the bulk challenge license in place, what I understand is the first thing we need to do is pull an address list from it. And I'm being told by August and some other people that if you do that, you find out that it's missing a whole bunch of addresses that will apply to the count. So that's relatively easy. Although I'll need we'll either need to use time from our GIS coordinator or a consultant, a contractor, to do that work. And then the other related project is Michael and I and John are working with Frontier. We still do not have a contract in place with them for our $950,000 match on their grant. I don't know, Michael, if you got any update. That's all I got.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for John or Jerry on C, E, or F? Okay, thank you, Jerry. Thank you, John. All right, now we'll move back up to 7B, update on ordinance 12.04, assembly proposed revision process. Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Be very brief. I did get from this committee, there are individuals that are interested in assisting in that work group effort. From the annual work plan prioritization project, this is one of those projects that fell into that second tier of not this year, but it's still important, start to plan for next year. That said, in speaking with Chair McEwen, I'm going to try to identify some resources outside of administration as I look over at CPZ to take this on, because, it came up again at the county board level with some revisions to the zoning code. And if you recall, Supervisor Dickinson kind of highlighted that, hey, there's assembly related pieces within the zoning code, and we haven't really made the changes to 12.04, which caused me to think, maybe there's an opportunity to have CPZ take the leadership on this as opposed to solely within administration. And I think we're going to have the opportunity to get that, move in that direction. So I'm going to work with Lori to develop a charter for that work group. Again, not a task force, but just a couple of board members from those standing committees most impacted to really assist staff in making those revisions, because there are those what I'll call more policy focused areas that really, quite honestly, I don't want staff coming up with those approaches. I want to get some feedback from each of you as elected officials. But we'll put that charter together. We're waiting for ERC, just had their meeting this week, and they discussed again about identifying a couple of members to assist in that effort. So we anticipate having those individuals identified very shortly. In terms of a timeline to kind of start this process, Lori's got a couple other projects that they're working on that I don't anticipate being able to take this on and really get that charter started until perhaps the second half of the year, because we have some things with the assessments and getting ready for open book with the municipalities that this is the first year that her office has really played a much more active role in that. But once we move forward and get comfortable with where we're at on those processes in terms of addressing the property listing backlog that the county board's been informed on a couple of occasions. They've done a really great job. But really, once we get those assessments and that open book process a bit further along, I think we'll be able to get that charter in place. So, and again, I think it aligns well based on the aspects of the zoning code that interface or at least address some of the same issues as the assembly ordinance that we've talked about before, and some of the issues that Corp Council has flagged that we need to update. So that's kind of where we are. Happy to answer any questions, or if anyone has any concerns about that plan, please let me know. But based on the prioritization process from the county board for the work plan, it was one of those things for next year. But given that it's tied to zoning, I think we might be able to find a different way to move that up the calendar a little bit.
Thank you, Administrator Leonard. Is there any questions? Okay, thank you. And thanks, Lori and CPZ, for willing to take the lead on this, because I think it fits well. So, for however you designate it. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to 7D then, if there's no questions. Update on annual report for municipal separate storm sewer MS4 permit. And we have Kevin Lane online and Jeff Pritchard from CPZ here to lead that discussion.
All right, just touch base. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you, Kevin.
Okay, so the MS4 annual report, that is a report we submit to the DNR each year. MS4 is for the separate storm sewer systems. It's limited to the urbanized area around Wausau. And what it does is it includes all of our county property that's in that urbanized area, and then all of our highway right-of-way that's in that urbanized area. A couple different pieces to it. One is there's an education and outreach that's related to stormwater. We partner with the North Central Wisconsin Stormwater Coalition to accomplish a lot of those measurements that are in there. There's ordinances related to construction and stormwater, and we partner with our municipalities to do the enforcement on those. It's kind of an odd relationship where we're supposed to have a stormwater ordinance for construction management, yet we don't issue building permits and do inspection on it. That's why we partner with the municipalities so they can take care of that requirement for us. And then the other piece is our internal maintenance and management of stormwater on our facilities. So we document for them like how much sand salt we put down on the road, and then we also have measurements in there for street sweeping, cleaning up stormwater inlets, and that type of thing. So this is a report that we submit, and then there's a fee that comes with it. I think in June or July, Lance usually gets an invoice for that. So I guess the annual report submitted in there, it starts on page 45 in your packet and runs for about 30 pages. If you guys have any questions on it, Jeff and I can help answer those. Otherwise, I will lead in that this is coupled with 7H coming up on the agenda that Lori and Jeff are here to help out with too. So I guess here's my brief explanation. Any questions on it? Take those now.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there any questions for Kevin? Okay, Jeff? Anything to add? No? Okay. All right. Any questions? Supervisor Robinson?
Do we need to act on this? I know in the past we have, but or as we turn this over to administration?
Yeah, there's no action.
This is my understanding.
Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
There was a resolution, this was several years ago, to have administration take care of signing and submitting it. So we put it on here. The report requires that we have that we bring it to the government entities, and ERC and infrastructure are listed on the annual report for those two committees that we bring the information to.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you, Kevin. If not, we'll move on to 7G, the 2024 Summer Road School, June 7th or June 5th through the 7th, 2023 at Chula Vista in Wisconsin Dells. Mr. Griesbach, you want to? I would encourage, especially the new supervisors, to attend that. But Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I just threw that on there. I emailed everybody this morning the tentative agenda, so you can take a look at it. If you plan to attend, please let me know so I can get you a room so you don't have to stay in your car in a parking lot.
Thank you. All right, moving on to 7H, overview of the MS4 Urban Stormwater Quality Management Plan. We have Jeff Pritchard and Lori from CPZ that are going to lead us with that.
Okay, I will start, and then Jeff and Kevin are also here to provide more context and answer the technical questions related to this report. But as part of our MS4 report, and I believe the memo related to this starts on page 33 of the packet, and I think I see it. Okay, there we go. As part of our MS4 permit, we are required to do a stormwater quality management plan update, analyzing where we are not in compliance with pollutant discharge in our MS4 area, and then recommendations, looking at recommendations for how we will achieve that compliance. So in 2019, we went to Wisconsin DNR and got a grant, a planning grant, to develop this plan. The last time we had updated our stormwater quality management plan was in 2011. So Strand and Associates came on in 2019 to do the analysis and come up with a series of recommendations for us. And they also worked in conjunction with CPZ, Highways, and Wisconsin DNR to do this. Through the analysis, we did identify that there is one reach within our permit area called Reach 154 here in the metropolitan area that we are not in compliance. And we are, our excess is 42.7 pounds of total phosphorus is where we are not in compliance. And by comparison, if you look at our strategic plan, we're trying to reduce phosphorus in the Fenwood by 14,000 pounds. So 42.7 pounds is not a big reach, I guess you would say. It's not a huge pollutant that we're discharging there, but still something that we are required to achieve compliance on. So Strand went through and analyzed within this REACH 154, and in the packet, it shows you again where it is. The yellow lines show the county right-of-way, including Marathon Park in there in terms of where we're not in compliance. They went through and developed a series of recommendations on projects or actions we could take to gain that compliance and reduce that 42.7 pounds of phosphorus. So within those recommendations, there are a series of construction projects that could take place within REACH 154. They've also recommended the county look at water quality trading projects. There's some nuances to how that works, that some of that could be trading with partners who have excess credits or are in compliance within REACH 154. There's also a possibility we may be able to look at agricultural water quality trading credits outside of the MS4 area, like in our Fenwood area, to trade for projects there to get us that compliance that we need. But there's several nuances as it relates to water quality trading that we still have to work out with Wisconsin DNR to identify if this could be our best route to achieving compliance in the short term, because it's by far the most cost effective. And then on the last page of the memo, it does show the other projects that they identified that would help us achieve that compliance, including wet ponds in Marathon Park and Camp Phillips Road. Many of these projects will require a partnering effort with some of our municipal areas to develop these projects, but they also will be needing to meet compliance for their MS4 permits, so there's obviously benefits to them partnering on these projects to achieve their compliance requirements as well. So at this point, this is a series of recommendations that we give to Wisconsin DNR, that it's a roadmap that says, okay, these are the projects we're going to look at, and then we start to go towards implementation in terms of how do we actually start to implement some of these recommendations and achieve that compliance. So we will be coming back to the county board in the future to talk about these projects more in depth in terms of funding and policy that may go along with trying to pursue some of this. Strand and Associates was also contracted to come to county board and give a more in-depth presentation on this report, so they will be here on April 20th to do that. We wanted to present to infrastructure and ERC first so that we could gather additional questions that you might all have so that we could help develop that presentation. What you add?
Thank you, Laura. Go ahead, Supervisor Seibert.
On the water quality, on the trading aspect, what's the current rate?
Use your mic.
What's the current rate per trade? Is it $57?
I don't know if we know the answer to that.
I think it's, I've gone through this, and I think it's $57. And when the county buys credits, what are they paying?
I think, do you know?
That's a good question, right? I don't think there's a very clear answer to that. You are hitting ballpark numbers. Those types of agreements also have to be approved by DNR, and they're usually with a point source discharger. So a local wastewater treatment plant that we might be able to partner with, or they may want to partner with us. Numbers may vary, but I'm going to say ballpark would be about 150.
Per credit?
Correct.
And so who pays that 150? Would the county pay that 150?
It depends on who's entering into the water quality trading project. So if it's a wastewater treatment plant that needs to purchase credits, they would be. If it's us, then we would be.
So the question I have then is, we paid, the Roselleville wastewater treatment paid $57 a credit. We created 46 pounds of phosphorus. That came to the county. So where does the county spend that? Supposedly the county spends that 57 on buying credits in Marathon County. So we're paying 57 and they're paying 150?
That's a different program. That's not specifically a water quality trading program. And as I understand it, I'm not privy to that and work in that side of things. But that those funds that you just explained goes to the conservation side of our department, and they will do efforts out into the field to reduce phosphorus. So that funding that's provided by Roselleville and other point sources within that would qualify, fund a portion of the conservation department for efforts in the field.
Okay, the reason I asked that is Roselleville wastewater took the route of trying to eliminate it instead of buying the credits. Last year, we paid $36,000 in engineering fees to get rid of 45 pounds of phosphorus. So if we can buy credits for 47 pounds, that's $2,500 or $2,600. To me, that's a no-brainer. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
To that end, in terms of water quality credits and other, there's 3 different programs that exist specifically for point sources, Roselleville and their wastewater treatment system. There is a specific timeline that they are afforded, and it's generally on every 5 years would be the permit period. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, unless it's changed, that would terminate over a 20-year period. So at that particular point, you would either have to seek water pollution control loan funds to improve the wastewater treatment process, or some other process that's approved by DNR to extend that period.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Supervisor Dickinson, go ahead.
Do we engage right now in any of these purchase of credits, these water quality credits?
I am on. Boy, I'm on, I'm off. We do not at this particular point in time. The state is currently in the process of developing a water quality trading clearinghouse. They have been working on that for the last 3-4 years. And what we have heard is hopefully that will be established this year. We don't have a specific time. There are 1 or 2 water quality programs or projects that exist in the state, but they were not done through the broker or through the state group.
Thank you.
I'll just add that, yeah, Wisconsin DNR is asking us to reduce 4.3 pounds by 2030 right now. That's our first target. In 2025, when we renew our permit, they will probably ask for an additional amount of reduction. So in the report, Strand is outlining a suggested timeline for pursuing some of these projects and some of the efforts to get that reduction. It's some of that timeline is based on us applying for grant funds to do some of these projects. So they put it in the schedule so that we can apply for grant funds, say in 2026 or 2028, to start achieving projects towards that. So,
Thank you. Supervisor Dickinson.
Are they asking us or are they telling us?
It's a play. You were voluntold. How's that? It's under the Clean Water Act, and we have the NPDES permits, so we have to try to achieve these. I would like to stress the point that there is a difference between the MS4 area and the overall water quality standards for the county as a whole, because we're driven by our NPDES permit process for the MS4, and there are a series of MS4 communities primarily along the Wisconsin River. And then back in 2019, there's the total maximum daily load study that would impact more so Roselleville, right, and the rural areas in terms of the phosphorus reductions that's required within those reaches. And that's a similar but different approach.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions? All right, well, what's that?
You'll see more when they come to the board.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the report. It's kind of hard, it was kind of hard for me to understand, but helps when you explained it, so the whole board it would probably be easier, yeah, if you make the presentation, so, but thank you for that information. Is there any other comments, questions? Okay, all right, thank you. Moving on to 8, next meeting dates, times, announcements, and future agenda items. 8A, committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussions. Are there any announcements, committee? Okay. 8B, next meeting date will be Thursday, May 4th, 2023, 9 a.m. at the courthouse. Is there any questions? If not, I'll move down to number 9. A motion by Supervisor Robinson, second by Supervisor Dickinson, to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We are. Thank you very much, and thanks staff very much for all the information and time.